Mindanao, the southernmost part of the Philippines, has long been called the land of promise, and people have been migrating there for many years, many decades, because of its rich natural resources and strategic location in the Southeast Asian region. But its potential has been held back by these decades of conflict that we are now trying to bring to an end.
Well, the cost of the Mindanao conflict from the local, regional, and national level has been difficult to estimate. The World Bank came out with a figure of $2 to $3 billion from 1975 to the present, and about 50,000 people killed or wounded by the war, and a million displaced by it. But we really don't know how much. We don't know the exact amount at the local, regional, even national level, how much was spent, because there's been no budget study of even the government sides of how much it's spent in maintaining the war and sustaining the war.
Well, at the local level, the massive impact has been not only the loss of lives involved, but huge displacement of people. A large number of people, of course, have taken up residence in Sabah, but a lot of people are still in temporary accommodation. People have been displaced from their own units. In many cases, they can't go back because settlers from outside the region have moved in and taken over the area. That's a massive problem. There are problems within the community structure that hampers the addressing of a lot of these problems. Local warlords, clan leaders and so on have often been fighting with one another and opposing any efforts to reconcile. At the national level, of course, there's been a very costly process, and one which has really threatened the stability of successive governments. It's been an ongoing process for a long time with not a great rate of success over about 20, 30 years now. At the international level, things have gone fairly well. The OIC has played a pretty positive role, even though it's backing Mizwari and not taking part directly in the negotiations with the MILF. The Malaysian government has played a very positive role in forwarding the negotiations with the MILF, and a number of regional countries have provided troops to monitor the peace process. So that's all been fairly successful. Relations between the various partners have been fairly good over that period. But nonetheless, I think many people see the Philippines as a source of instability, particularly to the extent that terrorist elements have on occasions been associated with, particularly with the MILF in the Philippines.
The signing of a framework agreement on the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front conflict will definitely facilitate the trek towards a final peace agreement in Mindanao. And I say that because right now the momentum has been started, not only now among progressive groups and civil society, but also within the government and within the business sector, to seriously consider development in Mindanao and to seriously consider the prospects arising out of that agreement. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. It's going to lead to an increase, for example, in the investments that are most likely going to enter into the region, and it's going to definitely lessen rebellion-related conflict.
The framework agreement for the Bangsamoro, which was announced in Manila on Sunday, does represent, as Churchill said, the end of the beginning of this process. We have a set of principles that have been announced, a set of details that are being developed, and a process for going forward over the next few years, which will lead to a final peace, hopefully, with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. There are many obstacles to be overcome. There are difficult issues. There are people who oppose the peace agreement, both Muslims and Christians, from a number of different viewpoints. But I think the President of the Philippines, President Benigno Aquino, Pinoy as he's known in the Philippines by a nickname, he has assembled an inclusive enough coalition to make the process go forward. From now on, the question will be, how much difference does it make at the local level? How is it implemented? How are people at the ground feeling it?
This framework agreement is largely between the government and the MILF, although the agreement itself covers all the Moro peoples. And I think the mere fact that the MILF was brought into the table and that they agreed to this framework agreement. That's actually a big step, because the MILF was actually came about because they were largely unhappy with the settlement that was, if you call it that, the peace agreement that was reached between the government and then the MNLF. Because the MNLF then, what they got was for autonomy, and at that time, the MILF wanted cessation. They wanted their own government. Actually, they wanted to be separate from the Philippines. And now with the framework agreement, that is a very landmark agreement between government and them and the MLF. And essentially, this one says that they're no longer interested in cessation. They're no longer interested about independence. All they want as well is genuine self-determination. So in that sense, and that they agreed on principles about human rights, they agreed on principles about mutual respect for all peoples, Christians, Muslims, and even the indigenous peoples, then that really is a big step.
Well, clearly the new agreement is an important agreement and an important step forward in the negotiations with the MILF. But as the President also said, the details have to be worked out. This is a framework agreement. We've had a number of agreements in the past already, both with the MILF and with the MNLF, from which the IMLF split away. And repeatedly, those agreements are broken down when it's come down to negotiating the details of the agreement. We have a difficulty that the attempt to expand the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao, which has been in existence in various forms for quite some time, involves incorporating other communities with large Muslim populations, but in areas that are dominated by Christian Filipinos. We also have a problem that the negotiations with the MILF are part of the process, but we also have ongoing negotiations with the MNLF, which has the backing of the Organization of Islamic Conference. And that parallel discussion, which is seen as the implementation of the 1976 Tripoli Agreement and the 1996 agreement with the Philippine government, still has to go on. We've also got a group of regional elite politicians in the Regional Assembly. They are supporting the latest framework agreement, but again, there will be differences of opinion before them. So I think we've still got a long way to go before we have a full agreement that will be implementable. We also have emerging opposition from a lot of the Christian communities, particularly around Zamboanga, who have over a long period of time opposed any move to expand the area of the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao.
Well, I think with regard to the peace dividend, assuming that all these things will work out, it will be really good for Mindanao, but the problem really in the long term is how do you transition for, let's say, this group of rebel leaders in MILF, and there are so many factions of them, the transition from, let's say, a rebel group to a group of people who are able to govern, because based on the experience in the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao, when Nur Miswari became governor, from a rebel to a governor, he was not a good governor, and there are some problems in terms of delivery of basic goods and services. And for a long time, since the agreement was signed with the MNLF way back in 1996 or 1997, many of these provinces under the ARMM remained, poor. They continued to be the poorest places in the Philippines. So this speaks a lot about, in the long term, whether this agreement, as soon as it's signed and assuming that there are really new leaders that will be elected, it will necessarily translate to better services, goods and services, delivery of basic services in health and education, for example, which is going to be very difficult.
Going forward, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially with respect to garnering support and acceptance. First, within the Bangsamoro people, the MNLF, the other faction, has already voiced out its reservations, would be a mild term, about the framework agreement. And even the indigenous people, some of them have already voiced out reservations that they were not included in the talk. Although if you read the framework agreement, it really is about the welfare of all the Bangsamoro, including the indigenous peoples. But first, there is that very crucial task of garnering support, political support, from all peoples and even from the national government, even from those who are not from Muslim Mindanao. Because the only way we can make this work is if all of us will agree that it is the thing that Muslim Mindanao needs, it's the thing that the government really needs.
Well, I think there are three things that will most likely happen with the signing of a peace agreement. First of all, you will find investors seriously considering investing in the region. That has happened already. A group of Malaysian investors working on what is called the Federal Land Authority has tried to explore the possibilities of investing in palm oil. Secondly, I am sure that there's going to be more development aid that's going to be flowed into the region as a result of this agreement. And the third aspect will be, as more and more peace happens in the region, I suppose that a lot of Moros or Muslims who are living outside the region will probably consider reinvesting in Mindanao. There will probably be a few investments at the start, but we expect this to grow. First of all, because there are a few big companies already operating out of the autonomous region, and we think that based on their experiences and the prospects given by the signing of this agreement, that more will come to the region.
There will be a quick dividend from foreign donors and the Philippine government trying to do rehabilitation, trying to put in money to help people with their current livelihoods and infrastructure and the like. But in the long term, it will take a while before economic growth driven by private sector investment will pick up. It's going to take a while before people have sufficient trust that the conflict has gone down after so many decades, that we will have peace going forward. And the long-term outlook is good, but it is long-term. We'll have to see how it moves forward in the implementation.